Well, London's dead and quiet, and even the birds are social distancing. So seeing as I can't travel anywhere, what better time to think back about Peru? So while I get ready to show you the most incredible thing we found in Peru, let me tell you a bit about this country with a little exposition. Peruvian civilization is old, it's frighteningly old. Some of the man-made structures there are amongst the most ancient in the world, and they're seriously big. Here's the plaza at Session Bajo, and here's the Caral complex. The ancient cultures in Peru had an incredible grasp of engineering and technology, and I'm going to show you some things you might struggle to believe. Huacapuquiana is a temple complex in Lima, the capital. So Peru is on the Ring of Fire. It's a series of fault lines that cause frequent earthquakes and volcanoes. Around 2,000 years ago, the pre-Inca Lima culture built Huacapuquiana using a technique that would protect it against earthquakes using a suspension type technology. You can see here the individual bricks spaced out so there would be resilience to earthquake tremors. Now obviously my favorite bit of engineering in Peru is Sacsayhuaman.
My second favorite civil engineer.
But you're going to have to wait a bit to see that one. If you find ancient technology fascinating, don't forget to like and comment on this video, and that also means that you're a good person. So the pre-Inca peoples in Peru developed some incredible technology, medicine, engineering and art, and we're going to take a look at some airtight temples, floating islands, a giant laboratory, and more in the next couple of videos. Some of these cultures were able to perform skull surgery with a survival rate of 80 to 90%. And this is something that no other culture managed until over 500 years later. And in about 1440, the Inca culture conquered the others and subjugated them into a single kingdom with an incredible administrative and travel system. The Inca trails are still in use to this day, and they cover at least 40,000 kilometers. Then 100 years later, the Spanish under Francisco Pizarro conquered the Inca, and it's very easy for us to think that somehow this was like the bad guys in Avatar riding over the nice blue people in their magic tree.
I see you.
But actually, this was just the latest in a succession of conquests by different groups vying for power. All of them were bloody, and all of them were invading one another. Plus, the Inca culture was routinely killing its children, including a mass murder of 140 of them in a single sitting. So the rights and wrongs in the historical picture are perhaps more complex than we might be led to believe. The pre-Inca, the Inca, and the conquistadors were all technologically and culturally sophisticated, and they were cruel like you wouldn't believe. The history of Peru is written in tears, stones, and blood. Now, if you're going to Peru, Lima is cool and the food is amazing, but I wouldn't stay there too long because there's just too much to see in this country. In Peru, we met up with our additional travel buddy, Elspeth, and we got ready to adventure through the country. While you're in Lima, take time to look at the street art. South American street art is very culturally important, much more so than in many parts of Europe, as it was a real declaration of freedom against successive oppressive regimes. Obviously, you have to eat the food, and wow, Peruvian food is phenomenal. Personally, I'd recommend papa rellena at the restaurant Isolina, anticucho at a fonda, and ceviche and pisco sours anywhere. While we were there, we met up with one of Laura's school friends, Tom, who showed us a hidden fonda, which is an informal restaurant in somebody's house. There we had anticucho, and it was a really unique experience. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there is only one way to travel around Peru, and that is by the Peru Hot bus. There's a link in the description for that. There's a whole lot of reasons for this, but all I'll say for now is that they're going to get you to the places you need to go and provide a top quality experience, and you probably won't die. So after waking up at 4 AM, which was going to become a recurring theme in Peru, we made it to the bus and the adventure began. Our first stop was Paracas by the sea. The thing we were really there for is known as the poor man's Galapagos in the Islas Ballestas, but bad sea conditions meant we couldn't, so Paracas honestly was pretty pointless. Do the islands or just be on your way. After Paracas, our next stop was Huacachina, which is a real desert oasis. In Huacachina, we glamped in style, we made new Peru Hot friends at a barbecue party, and we experienced a long story where 10 people stood up on a bar because of a misheard announcement. Eventually we discovered that they only wanted the birthday boy Ted. Thankfully, no one died, including Matt, Mike, and me, and it turned out that Ted has a fire Instagram travel feed that everybody should follow, and there's a link in the description for that. Look, when you're in Huacachina, you must do the dune buggies. I thought it was going to be a mediocre experience, and I only bought the ticket because it was actually quite cheap. But it was absolutely amazing. I don't have video of the ride, unfortunately, because I was holding on for dear life. But here's some I stole from somebody else. Thanks to Flo for the footage here. Leaving Huacachina, we went past the Nazca lines. These are ancient works of art. They're about 2,500 years old, and they're made of consistent geometric drawings with lines totaling around 1,300 kilometers long, spread out over 50 square kilometers. Now that's next level graffiti. As you drive through the Peruvian landscape, you're going to realize that most of this country is mountainous, and mountains do not make for good farming territory. So to get past this, because they needed food in order to survive, the pre-Inca cultures invented terracing, which involves cutting huge steps into the sides of mountains to turn them into arable farmland, and the scale on which this was done is gigantic, just like everything else in Peru. So after yet another incredible meal with yet more incredible Peruvian food, we had a comfortable overnight ride in the Peru Hot Bus to the beautiful colonial city of Arequipa. We'd planned to spend 3 days in Arequipa for some downtime. We stayed in a lovely vaulted colonial building, we explored the city, and we enjoyed the food. I ate alpaca here. It was chewy, but that was probably because it was overcooked. Laura brought an alpaca hat so that she would later fit in the streets of East London. Now I haven't mentioned this yet, but Peru is high altitude, like really high altitude. Arequipa is over 2,300 meters, Cusco is 3,400 meters, and Puno is 3,800 meters, just the cities. In Arequipa, I found that walking took a lot of effort and I was almost always out of breath, and this continued more or less for the next 2 weeks. A lot of people fared better than me, but some others struggled as well. After leaving Arequipa, we got to Puno. Now the city of Puno itself is a dive, but it is on the shores of Lake Titicaca, a giant lake which makes up a chunk of the Peru-Bolivia border. And aside from having the funniest name of any of the world's bodies of water, and it just edges out the Pretty Boy Reservoir on that one, Lake Titicaca is home to the magical Uros floating islands. And these are yet another wonder of pre-Inca engineering. They were originally constructed over 1,000 years ago, and the Uros people have been living on them ever since. They're built of totara reeds woven together and anchored to the lake bed with sharp sticks and rope. Now you can visit, and you can even stay overnight, but if you sleep there, you will obviously freeze to death at that altitude. The people there have a simple and ancient way of life, almost untouched by the changing times, except that now tourists and solar panels provide a bit of income and comfort for this small but beautiful culture. On our way to the floating islands, we saw the sketchily named Willy Expeditions on Lake Titicaca, a name which I would only understand better when we finally got to Colombia. So then Peru Hop called, and we answered. We left the floating islands and we made our way to the jewel of Peru, Cusco, and the trek to Machu Picchu. But that's a story for next time. Remember to click like and leave a comment if you liked the video. This will help identify you as a discerning and intelligent watcher. And I'll be back soon with some tales from Cusco before we head up to Colombia. Bye.